Pest management though, Anita, you want to talk about this a bit, about preventative?
So basically, your first line of action is going to be preventive practices. And so, you know, to get away from the input-oriented type of system, that you have preventive practices, or what's called best management practices, and they can be cultural, biological, mechanical, then if none of those things are working for you and you still have a pest problem or a disease problem or a weed problem, then you can, you know, if there's appropriate input that you want to use, you can go that route. But you have to have these things in place, and that gets drawn out through your organic system plan. That's what you tell your certified what you're doing first for preventive. And preventive could be just having a really good soil nutrition program.
And then that brings us to materials and the use of materials on organic operations. Any type of material that any certified organic operation is using must be approved by their certifier before they apply it. And there are certain set of criteria that are used to evaluate all materials that are used for production. And this is the list. It gets a little tricky. It's just synthetic substances that are allowed for use in organic production, and then there's non-synthetic substances that are prohibited for use in organic production. And it could be a long discussion in itself as well, so we'll probably just move on so that we can have time for your questions. I included a couple slides on critical control points, and if you want us to cover this, we can, or we can.
As in hazard analysis, critical control points, HACCP?
That applies in like food safety plants for sure, and yeah, out on the farm it's more about like looking at potential for drift, for GMOs to drift, or pesticide drift, or other things like notifying your neighbors and putting up signs.
I think that the treated lumber is a good one. We get a lot of questions, I'm sure you guys do. Once you're certified, you can't use treated lumber. But if you have treated lumber that's already been applied on your operation and you're asking for certification, it basically gets grandfathered in. So it's already existing.
Would that be treated lumber even for buildings themselves, or strictly for what is being?
Strictly for your crop production.
Okay, good.
So if you had trellising, anywhere where a crop is going to come into contact, you can't use treated lumber. But if it's, I won't go into more detail. Let's keep going.
There's other critical control points like what the application equipment. And so any kind of application equipment must be cleaned out prior to use on the organic farm, and you have to demonstrate that this equipment was cleaned out. If it's fertilizer, seed drill, or any other type of application equipment like pesticides. So they typically are going to be cleaned out anyway, but you have to demonstrate this and show signatures of that. Same with irrigation water. If there's any concern of potential contamination in your water, then you have to be able to provide evidence that the water's been tested and it's free of any contamination. Also with fertigation, if there's a fertigation system in place, that you have the valves that shut off any potential for other products to come enter your irrigation lines. Storage of prohibited materials on farm is allowed, but there has to be very clear signage that shows this is for organic, this is for non-organic. And if you have a lot of Spanish-speaking employees, then you have to have bilingual signs, and employees need to be trained and versed in that. And our inspectors always inspect all the material storage areas, and they'll interview the other labor force on the farm and ask them questions such as that to make sure that people are being trained in that and they're aware of those requirements. Anything else you need to add?
No, I think that pretty much says it all.
Okay.
Record keeping. This is what all farmers hate, unless they used to be an IT director or something and they went into farming. But it's probably where we have a lot of challenges here, because everybody wants to farm. That's fun. But everything you do, you need to have some sort of record-keeping system. And somebody said earlier, oh, this is an audit. So if you think of an audit, The easiest way to think of is when you go to buy that organic apple or that produce at the farmer's market or at your retail outlet, that you can trace that commodity from when it got put on the shelf all the way back to when it got planted and what happened to that soil, or the other way around. So there's got to be clear audit trail throughout your whole system. So that includes any inputs, compost, manure, organic fertilizers that you use, having records of when you plant, when you put your fertilizer in, if you use manure, when you harvest, and where you sell your material. So I didn't even look at this, but anyway. Oh, I got most of it.
You got them.
And you
Different
have to-
scale for different operations. I think that's important because small scale operations, they don't have to have complex spreadsheets and all kinds of tracking records. It could be very simple.
It could be a journal. And it could be, I have one guy that has a shoebox, it drives me nuts, but he writes it on pieces of cardboard boxes, what he plants and what he harvests, and he throws it into this big shoebox. That and legal size, you probably know who it is, anyway, it's yellow legal size paper, he likes that, he writes all that stuff down, and he has his employees do it, and he just puts it in this big box. He's getting better at sorting it when I go there, because you know, basically you're being charged by us when we're out there sorting through your paperwork. So the more you have that together, but he's in compliance. He's in compliance. So
Are
yes.
there templates available to sort of streamline that process? To-
Lots.
Yes. Well, just about all certifiers will have certain forms that, like you said, a template to capture the necessary information. People can either use those forms or adapt it, you know, to an Excel spreadsheet or whatever they're using.
For larger organizations, not the small part, but for large organizations, it's even great to incorporate those documents, your compliance documents, into your procedures so that you actually are doing it as you go and there's checkbacks.
Oh,
Yeah.
It
absolutely.
makes it easier, but for the small farmer, the shoebox method might end up being a default, but with Excel available now, almost anyone can really do
I
21st century farming.
Let me tell you what this one farmer, who shall be nameless, he got a smartphone, and that was the coolest thing, because what he started to do is he would photograph his invoice, he'd photograph when he'd plant, he just went nuts with that thing. And it became, and he'd email me stuff, you know. It wasn't good on necessarily.
Throughout the year?
On the, well, you know, when he added stuff, but he had it. He had his invoices, and so he keeps track that way. And bless his heart, you know, and this is why I have all this gray hair. But that was a great little tool for him, that little smartphone. And so you gotta hand it, you know, maybe not getting on his laptop, but he records everything on that, so. You've probably seen some creative ways of doing things.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite was like an old paper plate where they written records on the back of it. It was in the milk bar.
Yeah?
In the-
Oh, then there's the ranchers.
Yeah.
It seems like, I'm just thinking about, it seems really easy to do all the way through doing the planting, transplanting, but then if you're a complex operation, the one part, and we're certified, so the one part I'd love your take on is how, we do the best we can, but when you have 60 or 80 crops like we do, and we harvest from multiple, we're small, 3 acres with 120 total beds. We're little tiny, but if we're
I know
harvesting,
exactly
we've
where
got
you're
10
going.
red butter lettuces here that are just
Yeah.
ready, and then we're gonna fill the order over here with 3 dozen from, so it's like at that moment, it's the harvest that is, we can certainly cite it to one of 2 fields, because that's all we have is 2 fields. But to the row, how specific do you want your small growers to be, I guess is the question. Around field siting.
I think just get really close.
Yeah.
Well, I think like we often use, we'll accept load lists and pick sheets. You
pick
get
sheets
an
are really
order
good.
from Veritable Vegetable and you hand it to your employees who go out there and harvest what you just got.
Yes.
And so check it off, sign that date that was harvested, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. We don't want duplicative records or
Right.
creating more work for people that doesn't make sense for farming at all.
That's a good
Right.
thing.
No.
One of the things that, we have a number of small farmers, and so it's either pick list or actually their sales invoice, because the nature of their business is they harvest that day
Yeah.
and boom, it goes out.
Yeah.
And then they have a record of how many pounds of this or how many bunches of this or that, because they want to get paid. And so those work, for a smaller operation, those work really well.
Yeah.
So like Elizabeth says, you don't need to then create another document. So that's where if you're working with your certifier, and usually, you know, the first year or two, we kind of see how you're doing things and, you know, give you the green light. Yes, that's absolutely fine.
I think we're gonna run out of time soon, so we
I'm
probably
sorry.
should. Oh, no, it's okay. Do you wanna know like the basic steps to the certification process, or should we just open up for questions?
Let's open up for questions,
Yeah.
and if nobody answers, we'll go to this. Does anybody have?
Well, as a small or beginning farmer, and the average income of a new farmer is less than $10,000 per year, what's the,
How much is it
when do you
cost?
really consider going organic? Because if it's gonna
Yeah.
be a huge part of your operating cost to get certified, where's that balancing line when you should really seriously consider it? Or what can you do before you actually take the step to get officially certified to make that road easier when you grow as a business?
Well, this is what I would suggest. If are you already producing something?
Not in a place that will remain the same.
When I have people, this is my own personal response, and you know, I can hear what Elizabeth says, but when I have somebody that small, I really encourage them to go through the first year. You know, I'll go over what the standards require and this and that, but plant and do what you're gonna do and see whether this is something you want to really do before you put the costs down. You know, if you're so small and your cost margin, you know, you're talking $10,000, I would spend that first year, I might suggest, depending what information I get from you, to see if you go ahead and do this, can you tell from the clientele that's gonna buy your product whether having that organic label is gonna give you a premium? Some people, the transparency, they get to know the farmer, they go out to the site, they can see what's going on, that's all they need. To do organic maybe isn't a big deal. But if you're putting it on a shelf where there's gonna be a label, then that organic gives you a premium. So that's it's kind of a call on your part, and I think, you know, talking to a certifier with the cost, then you can pretend that first year. If I was organic, would I be getting a premium? Does that matter? Where's my market going to be? That's a very quick.
Yeah, no, I would
To
agree.
add to that.
I would agree with that completely. I don't ever want to try and push people into certification if they don't need it or if they're able to sell direct. And it just depends though what your market is. If you're trying to get into Whole Foods, they're going to want you to have an organic certificate. At many farmers markets, consumers want to know that you're certified. And so it really depends on your market and where you're going with it. The cost of certification, it can be about, you know, if you're only selling up to $10,000 a year, then you could spend $800 or so on certification. That's significant for an operation selling less than 10,000. I just put up this slide that kind of reviews the fee structure that CCOF uses. And we talked about it at the last session, and we're really similar how MOCA does it and how CCOF does it. Ultimately, what it comes down to is about, I'd say, $800 or so for a beginning operation selling like $0 to $10,000 or $20,000 a year in gross organic production. The one benefit that people have had for the last 4 years has been the cost share program administered by here in California by the CDFA, but it's through the Farm Bill, and it gives certified clients up to 75% of your certification cost back. And so that's a
Which
real
is
nice
great.
benefit, because then you're paying, you know, $250 to carry that organic seal for the year is a pretty good deal. And hopefully it'll be in the next Farm Bill. We're really not sure where that's going to end up.
If I really knew that was there, I would tell somebody like you, go for
Get it now.
Because you're gonna get that back. We just don't know from year to year. But it's been going on for a while, but you know.
This
in
year's a
tougher
little
times.
special,
Yeah,
yeah.
this year's a little special.
We'll call it special.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows what'll happen with the next year. So the first year you have that additional application fee, and then after that, every year you have an inspection fee and an annual fee. And so, you know, if you're really well organized and ready to go at your inspection and you get them in and out of there, everything's beautiful, your inspection bill could be just a couple $100, $250 or something. So it just depends. Our inspections are billed at $60 per hour. And it's usually, you know, just depends on the size and scope of your operation.
And can you certify on leased land
Yes.
if you're a leasee?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. You just, if it's a new certification and you haven't been in control of that land for 3 years, you'll need to get whoever is managing or owning that land to sign an affidavit.
Okay.
And then, I know, Elizabeth, you have them go through the county and get a pesticide use report.
Okay.
We don't do that because we already have that system within our office. I basically walk from this file to this file. Or I go on the computer.
So we haven't.
Really, it's easier to get in the ding dong file than it's.
In other states, it's different too. It's funny because we have this new client in like Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and I was just talking to her the other day. I was like, well, can you just get some third party? Like, is there some county ag office? And she's like, no, we're not in California.